The Vatican fell into an unnatural silence after the white smoke rose above the Sistine Chapel and the voice from the balcony announced Pope Leo XIV. Outside, the crowds erupted in joy. Cameras flashed. Bells rang across Rome. But inside the thick walls of the Apostolic Palace, something felt wrong. A stillness settled. Not just reverent silence, an unnatural stillness, loaded with tension. The kind that suggests something has shifted beneath the surface, quietly, dangerously, as if the institution itself was holding its breath. Something had happened in the Room of Tears, that sacred liminal space where a newly elected pope dresses for the first time in white. It's usually private, solemn. But this time, guards nearby sensed a momentary disruption. They weren't trained to interpret emotions, but even they noticed it. Raised voices muffled by marble, an unexpected delay, attendants exchanging wary glances. Nothing explicit, but enough for whispers to start almost immediately and spread through the corridors like smoke. It was Cardinal Raymond Burke. He approached the new pope before Leo even appeared on the balcony. Not with congratulations, not with a pledge of loyalty, with a warning. The exact words have never been quoted, only the tone remembered. Cold, sharp, deeply personal. It wasn't ritual, it was a confrontation. A line drawn in sand, an act of defiance wrapped in canon law. Burke had long been the guardian of orthodoxy. Vocal, unmoving. He had challenged Pope Francis publicly, issued formal questions, the dubia, resisted every whiff of reform with unbending logic. But Leo was different, quieter, more enigmatic. He refused the Apostolic Palace, chose the modest quarters of Casa Santa Marta, declined lavish liturgical processions. All of it signaled something. He would not be absorbed by the machine. And that frightened the guardians of the machine more than any manifesto ever could. Leo wasn't a revolutionary in appearance. He didn't storm in with rhetoric or radical reforms. But his refusal to play the expected role sent tremors through the Curia. No thunderous speeches, no papal bulls announcing change, just presence, stubborn, deliberate, disarming. It unsettled those who measured papal authority by assertiveness and precision. He represented a kind of quiet that couldn't be controlled. Within hours, the Vatican's rhythm resumed. Appointments were made, press statements issued, courtyards swept. But the undercurrent was unmistakable. Whispers grew sharper. Traditionalists regrouped over dinner and prayer. Conservative outlets began planting seeds of concern. Senior cardinals met in private residences. Strategies were drawn. Some began reviewing contingency plans. The storm had begun. Not loud, but insistent. Leo's approach was subtle, but bold. Where others had carved doctrinal trenches, he left room for dialogue. Where the past demanded black and white answers, he offered questions. His first public message didn't issue correction or command. He spoke of listening, of mercy, of humility. Not a revolution in doctrine, but a revolution in tone, posture, and priority. And that, to some, was even more dangerous. Burke represented the Church of order, of vestments sewn in silence, of Latin chants echoing in ancient naves. For him, truth was not just doctrine, it was defense, a line that must never blur. To soften it, even in tone, was to betray it. Leo saw the Church differently. He called it a field hospital, not a museum of saints, but a shelter for sinners. Truth, for him, was a light to carry into shadows, not a wall to keep darkness out. The two met once behind closed doors. No aides, no cameras, just silence and two men standing at opposite poles of belief. Burke, in crimson, bracing centuries of tradition. Leo, in white, carrying the weight of wounded hearts. One sentence passed between them and became legend. Your Holiness, what you propose is a danger to the faith. It was not a debate. It was an indictment. Not heresy, but close. The words settled between them like cold stone. Leo listened. He did not respond. His silence was not weakness. It was recognition. He understood what had just happened. A prince of the church had stood before him and said, "Your leadership threatens the soul of the church." And Leo, unshaken, received it as he had received the papal ring, quietly, firmly, with the resolve of someone who had already counted the cost. What followed was not public war, but internal rupture. The church began to split, not in doctrine, but in daily life. Bishops in some dioceses quietly reinstated altar rails. Latin Mass found new breath. Liturgies became formal again. Elsewhere, new pastoral experiments grew. Listening circles, LGBTQ ministries, discernment paths for remarried couples. The faithful saw it. They felt the split in their bones. Families argued over parish shifts. Some felt betrayed. Others felt seen for the first time. Seminaries divided. Some professors resigned. Others whispered their allegiance. Influencers and Catholic YouTubers chose sides with increasing boldness. Traditionalists recycled Burke's interviews like prophecy. Progressives wept at Leo's quiet homilies. Burke didn't call for rebellion. He didn't need to. His image was enough. A bishop's refusal to implement a synodal suggestion. A wealthy donor's pivot to funding only Tridentine seminaries. A theologian citing Burke in private conversations. A movement was forming, not coordinated, but coherent. Leo never made sweeping declarations. He opened the door to questions. Female ordination, same-sex blessings, sacramental welcome for the excluded. He did not rewrite catechisms, but he made it clear. These questions were not forbidden. And that alone was enough to unsettle centuries of certainty. That was the deeper rupture. Not the threat of doctrine changed, but of control lost. The refusal to shut down uncomfortable questions. He quoted women from Scripture. He praised bishops who dared speak of change. He nodded gently at pain long buried. And in doing so, he shifted the center. Not the rules, but what was thinkable. This was not the Church's first earthquake. The Reformation began with murmurs. Vatican I sought refuge in authority. Vatican II breathed fresh air. Each shift began with silence, then split the ground. Today feels eerily familiar. New terms, synodality, accompaniment, but the same tectonic strain. In Krakow, bishops issued warnings. Confusion must not become compassion. In parts of Africa, pastoral accommodations were deemed betrayals. Meanwhile, in Latin America and Southeast Asia, the tone was softer. Fewer proclamations, more stories, more hands extended across pews. The Pope sees it all. He is not blind. He reads the tone behind every headline. He hears both the praise and the fear, but he walks on. Because Leo does not believe the Church exists to maintain itself. He believes it must be remade daily in the light of love. Communion, not conformity. Holiness shaped by healing, not hardened by control. Between Burke and Leo lies the Church's rift. Two futures, both grounded in devotion, one reaching backward for stability, the other leaning forward for breath. The clash is not abstract. It happens in Mass schedules, in liturgical choices, in youth groups and confessional lines. It happens in the hearts of believers who wonder which version of the Church will remain. No formal schism has been declared, but the fracture is already shaping practice. parish by parish, diocese by diocese. Trust has frayed, vocations altered, donors pulled back. The tension is no longer hidden, and the choosing has begun. The Church has survived emperors, inquisitions, reformers, but now it faces a different question. Not what is true, but how to love without losing truth. Can it hold tradition and reform without one devouring the other? Leo walks forward, quietly, but with resolve. Burke stands rooted. One believes in gentleness, the other in certainty. And between them, a church trying not to tear apart. The Church still stands, but its unity feels brittle, not from assault, but from within, not by fire, but by fracture. What happens next won't come with trumpet blasts or official decrees. It will come quietly, in decisions made by bishops, in choices whispered in parish halls, in the silence of faithful who no longer know where they belong. And one day, we may wake to find the split not announced, but already complete.